Last week in this space, I told you to pick up Jalen Tolbert. Who will be this week's sneaky stash that might pay off immediately? Actually, a few names that I really like. I almost couldn't fit them all in, but let's start with an obvious one, the possible replacement for Nico Collins in Houston. I know immediately people think Tank Dell, it's got to happen, right? He's finally going to come through, but not so fast. So, a couple of things there. First of all, if you didn't know, Nico Collins not just week to week anymore. He's on IR. He's going to miss several weeks. We don't know exactly. I mean, he's got to be back at some point, but look, 4 weeks is the minimum as of right now. Yeah, Stephon Diggs is number one there. We know this. Tank Dell should be the clear number two. He has not looked right this season. The next man up, who has already seen increases in usage, is Xavier Hutchinson. The basics on Hutchinson comes down to this. He's a second-year receiver who's drafted in the 6th round last year, a late pick by the Texans, and barely made a dent really in the stat sheet because he wasn't on the field much. Of course, they had Nico Collins breakout, Tank Dell until he got hurt, and some other guys. You might remember they had Robert Woods for most of last year, Noah Brown. Remember those guys? Okay, well, so they're gone, and Hutchinson now has a chance to not only play more, but start. Because remember, Tank Dell is the slot receiver. They're trying to replace Nico Collins. This is their big X receiver. And while it's not exactly the same, Hutchinson is a lot more similar in size. Nico stands about 6'4, 220 officially. Hutchinson's 6'3 and about 211. And so he's obviously not only not quite as big, but he's no Nico Collins, right? Nico Collins has now emerged as one of the best receivers in the NFL. Hutchinson is a 6th round pick just looking to get some targets, but he's going to play a similar role, and they don't have a lot of depth now behind him. Tank Dell should be the beneficiary in terms of targets, but you should also know that last week, after Nico went out, Xavier Hutchinson was on the field more than Tank Dell. His snap share was higher than Tank Dell, and he's going to be the one on the outside. So I can't guarantee Hutchinson will get more targets than Tank Dell, but he might actually just do more with them because, again, Dell just doesn't quite look like himself. Now, this particular week, I will just say I'm not expecting a big Hutchinson week necessarily. Don't love the matchup against the Patriots, not because they have such a shutdown defense or anything like that, but it's just probably not going to be a very high scoring game, to be honest. I will say this, though, if stud young corner Christian Gonzalez of New England is going to be all over Stephon Diggs, maybe that does leave Hutchinson open a little bit. But again, I'm not starting him or anything like that, but this is a very smart stash, especially if you did just have to put Nico on IR. And the next 2 weeks, where Nico will still be out, Hutchinson gets much better matchups. The Texans' pass offense in general does. They get the Packers and then the Colts. So this is the guy I'm probably looking to first if I have room on my bench. An injury is paving the way for another young receiver you've definitely heard of, A.D. Mitchell. He was a 2nd-round pick. Thought that he actually could have been a 1st-rounder on draft night. Didn't happen that way, and it didn't take too long for the Colts to snatch him up, which was interesting because at the time, a lot of people thought that's not what the Colts really need. I mean, Michael Pittman is still there. Of course, Josh Downs was coming off a rookie season where he was good until he got hurt, but look, this team has more needs. But no, they went with a receiver, and now you see why, because Michael Pittman is all of a sudden hurt, and he might be a candidate for IR. He's going to miss definitely multiple weeks as well with a back injury. Now, even before this injury, which kind of came out of nowhere, it didn't even look like Pittman was hurt in last week's game, but we did see Mitchell get involved early and often. He has season high 7 targets in week 5. Didn't do a whole lot with them, at least from the opportunities he had, only 4 catches and 38 yards. So we're still waiting for him to really do something of relevance for fantasy, right? It's not like he's been worth picking up just for what he has done. Even with Joe Flacco going off for 300 plus yards, Mitchell still didn't do enough for us to say, yeah, I need him on my team. Josh Downs is the one who stepped up. Well, now Josh Downs is the number 1 target in this offense, and Mitchell is the number 2. But look, would it surprise you if a talented guy like Mitchell emerged as the top target? This guy is actually doing a very good job of getting open. It's just the targets had not been there until recently, and it just hasn't quite clicked. But man, when it does, it could be explosive. You know, we look to fantasy points for a lot of our data that helps us make some evaluations this season. They have great stuff. If you haven't checked it out, you should. And so when you look right now through week 5, as far as rookie wide receivers go, A.D. Mitchell is actually doing the best in terms of winning, right? Win rates for separation. He's at the top of the list. He's getting open, just needs the targets. I mean, Michael Pittman is vacating a lot of the targets that are available in that offense. And so you think now Mitchell might be getting ready for some double digit target action. And once again, I will say, I really hope it's just still Joe Flacco in there. I mean, I hope for the sake of the receivers in this offense, I just like watching Joe Flacco sling it anyways. This guy just does not care. He will throw it and throw it and throw it until they score. Last week we saw Joe Burrow light it up, throwing it and helping fantasy owners out. You know what? You could benefit from Burrow just getting 1 yard this week. That's right. If you're signing up for Underdog the very first time, you get a new customer special. This is a free pick. Joe Burrow going higher than zero point 0.5 total yards. That's right. Burrow gets 1 yard this week, and you get that pick. You win, and you combine that with any other pick that you like. Just grab that pick if you use code NGAME when you sign up for the very first time on Underdog. Plus, you still get a deposit match up to $1,000 of bonus cash. Now, if you look at that last chart with Donnie Mitchell at the number 1 spot for rookies who are winning their routes, number 2, maybe you noticed it was Jalen Polk of the Patriots. And Jalen Polk, he had a touchdown here, a catch there, almost another score the other day, but he's still not doing enough to make you want to grab him for fantasy. But now we might have a reason, and that's because they finally switched quarterbacks. We're going to see the rookie Drake May, who's officially been named the starter for Week 6. No more Jacoby Brissett. Look, that game manager stuff, the just keeping it on the ground and trying not to turn it over, it's not working. All right, it's time. I know we want to see Drake May sit and learn, but what are the Patriots doing if they're not giving their first round pick, their future franchise quarterback, a shot? And this will bring life to the receiving core. Look, even if there are some mistakes and some turnovers, maybe they don't score a ton of points, but at least the receivers have a shot to do something. So this obviously gives Jalen Polk some renewed life in terms of fantasy because look, he's been getting open, he's been getting an opportunity, he's running routes, he's been out there. It's just this team does not pass enough. Maybe they'll pass at least a little bit more here. And it's really interesting because not just as far as rookies go, but if you look at the chart, again using fantasy points data here, all wide receivers, not just rookies, and you look at win rate for all receivers who've run at least 25 routes, he's 7th overall. You do look at that list and a couple names pop out, guys like Khalif Raymond. Okay, well, sure, this isn't guarantee of fantasy goodness. I get that. You also have to look at those other stats, targets per route run. Khalif Raymond's barely getting targeted. Okay, Jalen Polk, it's not that high either, but that's the whole point. It's going to change. He's going to get more targets now with the routes he's already running. He's going to see a little more action. Not a lot. I don't think this offense is going to all of a sudden just throw it 40 plus times a game. I don't think that, and I'm not saying that, but it will be higher than what it has been, and at least he's got some upside. So don't take this as me saying I'm all of a sudden in on the Patriots pass offense, but at least I'm somewhat interested now, whereas before I could completely ignore that it existed. There's another pass receiver I think you might actually have to take a look at, and for good reason. You remember Kendrick Bourne? He's back. He missed the first 4 weeks, but he actually did play last week. Only caught one pass on one target for 6 yards. But again, the whole situation with the quarterback is changing. But again, Bourne was going to always be the top receiver on this team because he just had to get healthy. And apparently now he's healthy. Now, Bourne sort of had his breakout already. He went to New England after a couple years in San Francisco back in 2021, and he was basically, along with Jacoby Myers, kind of the co-leader as far as receivers. He had an 800-yard season, which for New England's offense at that time was pretty good, right? We're talking about the Mac Jones-led Patriots at that time. Came back with a pretty disappointing 2022 season, and then came back, looked really good in 23 until he tore his ACL. Only had 406 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns, but that was in 8 games. He was on pace maybe for his best season yet. Yeah, I know it's nothing to do backflips over, but again, for considering the Patriots pass offense at that time, it was good, and he did have some fantasy relevance at that time. It was at least a strong flex option. And I think he might get back to that, being a pretty good high upside flex option at some point if May turns out to be legit. Bourne is back. He is good to go. It might take him a little bit of time to completely round into shape, but still, he has shown that he can be a reliable weapon, and the Patriots want him to be, and they believe in him because they actually signed him to a 3-year deal, despite knowing this injury. So he's going to be a part of this squad, along with Polk, along with Demario Douglas. That's it. Remember, Tyquan Thornton was in the mix early in the season. They're trying to trade him, right? They're getting rid of him if possible. KJ Osborne, Yeah, he's one of the worst statistically in terms of getting open so far this year. He has completely fallen off. So I think Bourne and Polk are going to lead this receiving core pretty soon. We also have a new quarterback in New Orleans. Derek Carr out for several weeks. We don't know exactly how long, but definitely a multi-week absence. And so now the job has been handed to Spencer Rattler. Well, Rattler is a rookie. I feel like we've known about him forever. Back in 2020 as a freshman, put up a really good season for Oklahoma at that time. 3,000 yards, 28 passing touchdowns. And so it looked like he might be on his way to being a future first round pick in the NFL. That's exactly what people thought after that season. And then it took just until the next year for him to lose the job. I mean, he didn't have a great season statistically, but he also got taken over by a guy named Caleb Williams, which is sort of ironic now when you think about that. Caleb Williams at Oklahoma forced Rattler to transfer to South Carolina, and then Williams himself wound up transferring. That's just college football these days. So Rattler went to South Carolina and had a couple of decent seasons, nothing amazing, and people forgot about his freshman year. It was a fifth round pick, and he was really just nothing more than depth. And now the Saints need that depth because Carr is out. But look, Rattler has this backup job because he actually showed up pretty well in the preseason. He impressed the coaches. You know, he was good enough to get this job right now, which he has, and he's already been announced as a starter in week 6. I will just say I'm only speaking right now to the Superflex 2 QB and Dynasty crowd. If you're in a 1 QB league where you only need to start 1 QB and honestly should only be rostering 1 QB, you don't have to pick up Rattler, and you probably shouldn't worry too much about him unless he just turns out to be amazing. And I don't expect that, but I do expect that he might have some more upside than a lot of these other quarterbacks out here. And let's just keep an eye on how he does. Remember, he does have some good receivers in Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed's been solid, and if nothing else, he's got the ultimate security valve here. Alvin Kamara, he can just dump it off and let Kamara do the work by himself. Now, I'll tell you what, as soon as people forget about a player who they were high on the draft season and had been stashing because he hadn't done much, it's the bye week, that's when I like to swoop in and get a guy like Blake Corum. Now, sure, right now you can look and say, you were just way too high on Blake Corum. He's done nothing. Kyron is still the guy there. Yes, this is all true. It is the bye week. And you know, a lot of these teams wait until after the bye to get these rookies more involved, especially running backs. Now, Kyron Williams is still clearly the RB1 there, and he's pretty much the whole offense. But let's take a hard look at the Rams here. They need something. And this is why I believe they got Corum involved a little bit for the first time right before their bye. Corum had not touched the ball since week 2. That was the first time, and that had been the last time since he even touched the ball. And that was because it was a blowout loss to Arizona. They were getting blown out by about 31 points. So Corum scooped up some garbage time, didn't play at all in weeks 3 or 4. But then in week 5, an interesting thing happened. Not only did Corum touch the ball, he did it early in the first half, and he even got some goal line carries. It made us wonder, is Kyron hurt? Nope, Kyron's fine. He just, like Corum, was actually getting some opportunities. Now, again, I don't expect him to all of a sudden get into a timeshare or anything like that, but you got to realize this team drafted Corum because they believe in his talent. This is a good offense for a running back, and you know running backs get hurt. So I'm not hoping something happens to Kyron Williams, but I'm going to hedge my bet if I have him. And even if I don't have Kyron Williams, this might be a nice time to pick up Corum when somebody else could have dropped him because of the bye. Those are some of the best players to stash now before week 6 kicks off. Of course, make sure you set your lineups right with our start sit advice. And everything you need to know is right here, as always, in this week's playlist.